Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the fog again, thick, damp, and smelling faintly like regret and coal dust. You step into London, 1885, where the streets are never quite empty, and the shadows seem to have conversations of their own. The air is cold enough to sting your nose, yet somehow it carries the warmth of freshly baked bread from a bakery you'll never afford. You wrap your shawl tighter, pretending that fabric thin as paper could ever keep out this kind of chill. You're about to start your first night in a world most people only whisper about. Spoiler, you probably wouldn't last 5 minutes here, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where and when you're listening from. Maybe you're somewhere warm, sipping tea in bed, or maybe, just maybe, you've fallen asleep to my rambling already. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Now, let's walk. Your shoes click on the wet cobblestones. Those shoes might be too generous a word. They're scuffed, thin, and barely attached to their soles, kind of like your dignity tonight. The fog curls round your ankles, climbs up your skirt, and kisses your cheeks with the kind of cold that makes you question your life choices. You try to stand tall, even though the city's eyes are always watching men in top hats, pretending not to notice. Women in carriages, pretending not to care. And policemen pretending they don't see you at all. Every corner smells different here. One alley reeks of fish, another of gin, another of freshly dumped chamber pots. You'd think people would stop emptying those out of windows by now. But apparently, hygiene hasn't caught up with Queen Victoria's empire. They call this progress sewers beneath the streets, gas lamps on every corner, but you still step over things that definitely used to be alive. The glow of those lamps is beautiful, though. They make the grime sparkle, like the city's trying to trick you into thinking it's romantic. You clutch your shawl again, and think about the choice that brought you here. Or maybe choice isn't quite the right word. When a factory pays 2 shillings a week and rent costs 3, romance isn't what brings a woman out into the night, it's arithmetic. You remember the girl you were. Clean hands, hopeful eyes, believing in marriage, or at least something resembling kindness. That girl feels like someone you used to know. Somewhere nearby, a church bell strikes 9. Each chime feels like a countdown to what, you're not sure. Maybe to the moment you stop pretending this is temporary. Or maybe to your first client, who appears exactly as you imagined and nothing like you hoped. A gentleman, or at least pretending to be. His coat smells of tobacco and money. He looks at you the way a cat looks at a trapped mouse, curious, detached, and already bored. You smile, because that's what you're supposed to do, and your lips tremble like they've forgotten how. He speaks first, a low voice full of entitlement and gin. "Cold night, isn't it?" he says, as though this were a courtship. You nod. You've practiced this, the polite laugh, the glance upward, the small talk about weather that hides the bigger transaction. It's strange how quickly a human being can learn to act like a shadow. He hands you a coin silver, heavy, glinting under the gaslight, and for a second, it looks holy. It's more than you made in a week scrubbing laundry. It's also the exact price of your first regret. The lesser-known truth about Victorian London is that prostitution wasn't as hidden as people like to imagine. There were thousands of women, like you, more than 80,000 in London, alone by some counts, and yet everyone insisted it wasn't happening. Respectable men wrote editorials about morality in the morning and visited you at night. Historians still debate whether society's hypocrisy was willful blindness or elegant denial. You suspect it's both. You lead him down a narrow alley, one of those places that never see sunlight. The gaslight flickers, making the walls breathe. There's laughter somewhere. Drunk couple, maybe. Or another girl doing her job with less hesitation. You catch your reflection in a window pane. Pale, tired, older than your years. You wonder if anyone would recognize you now. When it's over, it's quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort but exposes. You smooth your skirt, pull your shawl back into place, and pretend it didn't happen. You don't cry. You don't even sigh. You just start walking again. Because in this city, if you stop moving, you disappear. Down the street, a constable tips his hat as he passes you. You can't tell if it's respect or mockery. Probably both. There's a rumor that some officers take bribes from the brothels they're supposed to shut down. Others just take favors. Either way, justice here depends on who's paying. You pass a newspaper boy shouting headlines, something about Parliament, something about cholera. People still think disease spreads through miasma, bad air. You smile at the irony. If bad air caused illness, London would have perished decades ago. But you breathe it in anyway, because you have no choice. The city hums around you. The clatter of carriage wheels, the hiss of gas, the distant barking of dogs. Somewhere, someone's playing a violin, off-key but heartfelt. You stop for a moment, letting the sound wash over you. Maybe there's still beauty here, thin, fragile but real. You cling to it the way a drowning person clings to driftwood. You think about home, or whatever counts as home now. A narrow room above a tavern, wallpaper peeling like dead skin, a mattress stuffed with straw that smells faintly of mold. You share it with two other girls, both younger but already more cynical. One coughs in her sleep, deep and wet. You try not to listen. The doctor says it's just a cold, but you know better. In this city, coughs have names: consumption, pneumonia. Heartbreak, and they all sound the same. You wonder how long you can last here. A week, a year. Maybe long enough to save enough money to leave. Maybe not. For now, you just walk. The fog thickens, swallowing your silhouette. You pass a poster nailed to a wall. A preacher announcing salvation, 5 pence a seat. You laugh softly. Even God charges admission these days. Your fingers trace the coin in your pocket. It's cold, smooth, and unbearably heavy. You think about what you'll buy with it: food, rent, another night of pretending. Then you realize it doesn't matter. The city always takes back what it gives, just in a different form. A gust of wind sweeps down the street, lifting your skirt just enough to remind you that you're still here, still moving, still breathing. You pull your shawl tighter, whisper to yourself that tomorrow will be easier. You don't believe it, but the lie feels warm for a second. Somewhere above the rooftops, the gaslight flickers and steadies again. The city exhales. So do you. And just like that, your first night begins. You wake up to the sound of something dripping. Not rain this time, condensation sliding down the inside of a cracked window, plinking into a tin bowl you placed there days ago. You've become something of a water collector, though it's not the glamorous kind. Morning in your lodging house doesn't begin with sunlight. It begins with smells. Cheap gin, boiled cabbage, and the faint perfume of too many dreams dying in one room. You sit up and reach for your small, cracked mirror, the one with the silver backing peeling away like the skin of an old onion. The face looking back at you isn't exactly what you remember. It's you, but paler, thinner, slightly ghost-like. You smile at your reflection, then stop it looks unnatural, like a doll trying to imitate a person. So you reach for your powder. The puff is coarse and smells faintly of lavender, though not the nice kind you'd find in the Queen's Gardens. This is the sort that's been stretched with chalk dust and a prayer. You pat it onto your skin, covering the night before. Then rooster little circles of defiance. If you squint, you could almost be an actress getting ready for the stage, except your audience won't clap in the corner. Another girl hums while curling her hair with a piece of heated iron. She's using whale fat as pomade, a trick someone passed down in whispers. The scent could knock out a horse, but it keeps the curls shiny. Men like shine, she says, half to you, half to herself. You wonder if that's true or just something people say when the truth is too ugly to repeat. Outside, the city is already awake. Street vendors shouting, carriage wheels splashing through puddles, the occasional preacher calling for repentance. You stretch your arms, bones popping like fireworks, and get dressed. Corset, skirt, shawl, and that final touch-a-dab of perfume. It's labeled Essence de Paris, but you know it was brewed in a bucket behind a gin shop in Whitechapel. You could swear it smells like regret mixed with violets. Still, perfume does something. It gives you a shield, a tiny invisible armor that says, I'm still human. You think about how women today spray something called eau de confidence or body mist, morning bliss. Back then, confidence came in bottles too, just with more alcohol and less honesty. The streets outside shimmer with last night's rain. You step carefully to avoid the mud, but there's no real way to stay clean here. A man in a bowler hat tips his hat as you pass. You can't tell if it's flirtation or mockery. Either way, you nod back. Politeness is another form of survival. You meet other girls heading toward the same places. The pubs, the music halls, the dark alleys that serve as stages for your nightly performance. Some of them joke, some stay silent. You all share the same perfume of lavender and fear. One of them, Mary, laughs and says, "At least we smell better than the politicians." You snort because she's right. If power had a scent, it would be pipe smoke and hypocrisy. There's talk in the papers about morality again. Some committee of gentlemen naturally arguing whether women like you should be regulated for the good of public health, as if your body were a civic hazard. Historians still argue whether these laws were for protection or control. You know the answer. Control always wears the mask of protection. It's the same trick, century after century. You pass by a chemist's shop. In the window, little bottles glint in the gaslight. Cure for female weakness. Elixir of chastity. You roll your eyes. Half of those potions are made of mercury and vinegar. They promise purity, but they'll kill you faster than sin ever could. The irony is almost artistic. A lesser-known truth, whispered among women, is that lemon juice became a kind of desperate birth control. Not effective, but at least it gave them the illusion of agency. People will risk a lot for the illusion of control. You make your way toward Covent Garden, where the morning bustle hides all sorts of business. Men buy flowers, women buy gossip, and you buy time. A minute here, an hour there. Each transaction another piece of the day you can afford to live. The market smells like roses, mud, and horse dung. Somehow, the mix works. A young constable stops you near the gate. He's new. You can tell by the clean uniform and nervous eyes. "You shouldn't be here, miss," he says, voice trembling just enough to betray his inexperience. You tilt your head, smile softly. "Neither should you. love. But here we are. His face turns red. You walk away before he can decide whether to arrest you or blush harder later. In a cafe where the tea tastes faintly of tin, you watch women in fine dresses sipping politely, their gloves spotless, their laughter rehearsed. They glance at you once, then turn away. But you notice the powder on their cheeks, same chalk base, same lavender scent. You smile to yourself. The difference between you and them isn't cleanliness, it's visibility. They sell illusions from drawing rooms, you sell them from the street. The product is the same, the packaging just costs more. Sometimes you wonder what you'd look like without all this powder and perfume. Would anyone recognize you? Would you? There's something frightening about realizing your real face has become a secret even from yourself. You imagine washing everything off literally and metaphorically and walking somewhere new. But then the rent collector's knock echoes in your mind, and the fantasy fades as the afternoon sun slips behind a curtain of smog. You sit by the Thames, watching the water shimmer with oil and filth. It's oddly beautiful, like the river's wearing makeup too. You take out a piece of bread, tear it in half, and feed a small bird that lands near your foot. Its feathers are dull, patchy, tired looking, just like yours. You laugh softly. We're quite the pair, aren't we? The bird tilts its head, unconcerned with your philosophical humor, and hops away. You envy it. No corset, no debts, no need to powder its beak. Evening comes faster than you expect. The lamps flicker to life again, one by one, as though the city is winking. You catch your reflection in a puddle powder, still mostly intact, eyes a little softer now. Maybe it's the light, or maybe it's the fact that you're still here, still breathing, still surviving. You think of all the women after you've modern, polished, scrolling on glowing screens, worrying about filters instead of fog. Maybe they'd laugh at your cracked mirror, your lavender powder. But maybe, if they listened closely, they'd hear the same thing beating underneath it all. The need to be seen, to be loved, to be safe. You rise, adjusting your shawl, the perfume still clinging to your wrist. The night smells of promise and exhaustion. Another client might be waiting, another story to live through. But for now, you take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let the scent of cheap lavender and stale gin remind you you made it through another day. And in this city, that's no small miracle. By now, your feet know the city better than your heart does. Every step is a memory, every corner a gamble. You've learned that the streets have moods, some flirt, some bite. The ones near the docks whisper in broken accents, full of sailors' laughter and cheap rum. The ones near Mayfair wear silk gloves and polished lies. You walk between them like a ghost with good posture, pretending you belong to both worlds and neither dot the cobblestones glisten after a drizzle. Catching the faint light of the gas lamps, you've started to recognize them the way some people recognize faces. That uneven stone near the baker's, always slick, the cracked one by the pub. It hides a puddle deep enough to baptize you. You could walk these streets blindfolded and still avoid the worst patches. A useful skill, though not the kind you can write on a resume. You pass by a group of young men in tall hats, their laughter echoing against the walls. They look at you like you're part of the scenery, decorative, disposable. You give them your practiced smile, the one that says, yes, darling, I see your wallet too. In another life, maybe you'd have been invited to dance with them. In this one, you know better than to linger. Some nights, you play a little game to keep yourself sane. You imagine each passerby as a character from a story. That man with the monocle, probably a poet with a gambling problem. The woman clutching her purse like it's made of gold. Maybe it is. Maybe she's the wife of someone important, sneaking home from a place respectable women don't go. London is full of secrets, and you've become fluent in their language. Down an alley, a cat darts past, knocking over a tin can. You flinch out of instinct, then laugh softly. The sound startles even you. It's been days since laughter came out of your mouth without effort. Funny how danger doesn't scare you anymore, but unexpected joy does. A policeman stands at the corner, twirling his baton like he's rehearsing for the stage. You nod politely. He looks the other way. There's an unspoken understanding between you. His silence costs a shilling, maybe two. Some say the law is blind, but here it just squints and pretends not to see. Historians still argue whether the police of your time protected morality or merely managed it. You suspect the answer depends on who's paying their rent. You duck into a side street where the air feels heavier, warmer, and not just because of the smoke. A man waits under a lamppost, his coat collar pulled high. You can tell from his stance he's nervous first-timer. You can always tell. He fumbles a greeting, offers a coin before you even open your mouth. You take it with a soft thank you, though it feels like a transaction between strangers pretending to be something else. Later, when he's gone and the echo of his boots fades, you sit on the edge of a step, fingers tracing the cool metal of that coin. You wonder who minted it, who touched it before you. Maybe it passed through a duchess's purse, a shopkeeper's till, a thief's hand. Money doesn't care about class. It just circulates, collecting fingerprints and stories. A little like you, farther down the road, you see a newspaper stand. The headline screams about a murderer, another woman, another alley. The name Jack is whispered with both fear and fascination. You sigh. The city has found a new monster. Though you know the real ones don't hide in shadows, they walk in daylight, with polished boots and clean consciences. Still, the rumor has made your nights quieter. Men are suddenly cautious, as if morality can be found in temporary fear. A lesser-known truth about these killings, though you wouldn't phrase it that way out loud, is that some people actually romanticize the murderer. Artists sketch the crime scenes, penny papers sell more copies, preachers shout louder. There's profit in fear. The world always finds a way to turn tragedy into entertainment. Even now, more than a century later, people still binge documentaries about you and him. You'd laugh if it weren't so absurd. You head toward the bridge, the one where the fog hugs tighter and the lamps glow dimmer. The Thames below moves like a slow creature, sighing under the weight of all the city's sins. A man stands by the railing, tossing breadcrumbs to the water. He looks ordinary until you realize he's wearing a priest's collar. He turns slightly, catches your eye, and for a second, you both just exist. To sinners, to souls, equally small against the night. Then he looks away. So do you. The wind carries the smell of coal and the faint sweetness of roasted chestnuts from a vendor nearby. You buy one, even though it costs too much. The warmth seeps through your gloves, and for a brief, ridiculous moment, you feel rich. You think about how people today complain when their coffee order takes too long. If only they knew the luxury of simply being warm, safe, and anonymous. Across the street, a carriage splashes through a puddle, drenching your skirt. You groan, mutter something unholy, and the driver doesn't even look back. You imagine sending him an invoice for emotional damages. Victorians didn't have lawyers for that, though you suspect some could have made a fortune off your stories. You wander on, half damp, half determined. The city hums beneath your feet, rhythm you've come to know by heart. Somewhere, a pub door swings open and laughter spills out like light. You peek inside for a second. Musicians, sailors, drunk poets all, melting into one chaotic chorus. For a heartbeat, you want to join them, to sit down and forget who you are. But the feeling passes. People like you don't get to disappear. You just learn to fade politely. Still, there's something strangely alive about these nights. You see kindness in small places, a loaf shared, a warning whispered, a stranger's nod when the constable looks away. It's a quiet kind of rebellion, one that doesn't make history books, but it's there. The heartbeat of those who survive by outsmarting despair. A clock tower chimes 11, its sound swallowed by the fog. You realize you've made it through another night without vanishing. The streets haven't taken you yet. You look up at the lamps flickering against the mist, and they almost look like Stars London's version. Man-made and imperfect. You breathe it in, all of it, the soot, the secrets, the sadness, and exhale something softer. Maybe resilience, maybe hope. You tell yourself that one day, someone will walk these same streets, free and unafraid, without having to sell a piece of themselves to do it. And you hope they'll remember you not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that even in the dirtiest corners of history, light still found a way to glow. You smile faintly, pull your shawl close, and keep walking, because that's what you do. The city watches, and you watch it back. Somewhere between the danger, the laughter, and the lies, you've learned its biggest secret of all. The streets may own your body, but your soul still belongs to you. You push open the splintered door, and the familiar scent of damp wool and human breath greets you like an old friend who never bathes. The lodging house sighs around youward, groaning, pipes, coughing, rats celebrating their victory feast under the floorboards. For women live here, if living is the right word. You've got your corner, your chipped mirror, your half-rotten mattress, and a window that pretends to open but doesn't. Still, it's better than sleeping on the embankment, where the wind slices like unpaid rent across the room. Mary snores softly, a sound halfway between purring and drowning. She used to be a seamstress, until the factory closed after the fire, one of those unfortunate accidents newspapers say will never happen again. You glance at her hands, still moving in her sleep, sewing invisible seams in the air. You almost envy her. At least she dreams of work, not men. The lodging keeper, Mrs. Dunsby, charges by the night, and charges extra for silence. Tonight, she's downstairs arguing with a constable about unpaid protection money. You catch only fragments through the cracks in the floor. 2 shillings a week. Clean sheets. What sheets? You smirk. Even the rats would laugh if they weren't too busy gnawing through the flour bag again. You peel off your corsetta, slow. Wheezing ritual and hang it beside the bed. A stripe of moonlight slices across the room, lighting the pale blue wallpaper, the one covered in faded roses. Each flower seems to wilt a little more each night. You sit down and count your coins, 3 pence, 2 halfpennies, and a bent button. Enough for tomorrow's rent, maybe not for breakfast, but hunger has become an old roommate. She rarely leaves, she just grows quieter. Outside, the city hums like a restless beast. Somewhere, a carriage wheel clatters over the cobbles. Somewhere else, Laughter bursts out from a gin palace, all smoke and false perfume. You think of those rich women who host charity teas for fallen girls like you, sipping Earl Grey while discussing morality as if it were a new fashion trend. They'd faint if they smelled this room. You chuckle softly if hypocrisy had a scent. It would be jasmine and denial. You brush the dust from your dress and glance at the wall, where someone has scratched a message. We were here. We tried. The words look like a prayer, or maybe a warning. Nobody knows who wrote it. Some say it was Annie Chapman before she met her end in Whitechapel. Others insist it was a girl who survived the fever. Outbreak of '68. Historians still whisper about which of those stories might be true, as if solving that mystery could somehow scrub away the grime of this place. You lie back on the mattress, the straw inside rustling like dry leaves. Above you, the ceiling leaks a slow, steady drip. One drop lands on your forehead, cold, precise, irritatingly consistent. You could almost time your heartbeat to it. Maybe you do. You pull the thin blanket closer, thinking of warmth not as comfort, but as luxury. It's funny, you muse, how people now complain about small apartments or roommates who steal their oat milk. Try sharing a chamber pot and a single candle with 3 snoring strangers, then talk about minimalism. Somewhere, Clara begins to hum. She always hums when she can't sleep. Her tune tonight is My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, the irony being that her Bonnie drowned months ago. She never speaks of it, but you see it in her eyes, that hollowed out kind of love that still believes in ghosts. You hum along softly, your voice barely more than breath, and for a moment, the room almost feels warm in the corner. A small pile of belongings tells the story of everyone who's passed through. A broken hairbrush, a tin cup, a Bible missing Genesis, a child's shoe no one can explain. Mrs. Dunsby once said the shoe was left by an angel. You suspect the truth is closer to a debtor's prison or a workhouse. But angels do sound better for business. The lodging house has its own kind of rhythm, a creak here, a cough there, the occasional scream muffled by the fog outside. Nobody asks questions. Curiosity is a luxury too. Yet, every now and then, you hear a new rumor floating through the city. A woman gone missing, a man found with his throat cut. The papers call them moral tragedies. The women here just call them Tuesday, a lesser-known truth, though seldom whispered aloud, is that many lodging houses doubled as safe houses, places where women hid each other from violent pimps or the police. You once helped conceal a girl from her gentleman friend, the one who paid for her room and her bruises alike. He never found her. You sometimes wonder if she made it to the country, or if the city eventually swallowed her too. You stare at your hands. They're rough, chapped, older than they should be. Still, they've learned the art of survival, of folding bedsheets fast when inspectors come, of pretending to sleep when men peek through the cracks, of turning shame into laughter. You can't help but think that, in another century, these same hands might type on glowing rectangles, writing comments about romantic Victorian life. You almost laugh out loud. If only they knew the romance smelled like mildew and regret. As the night deepens, the laughter downstairs fades. Mrs. Dunsby's voice softens into mutters. The constable leaves, and silence settles like dust. You close your eyes, listening to the lullaby of the city, the hiss of gaslight, the distant rumble of wheels, the endless breathing of a world too tired to sleep. You wonder if anyone, years from now, will think of you, Perhaps some curious historian, candle in hand, will argue over whether you were a victim of circumstance or a woman of agency. You grin in the dark. Let them debate. You lived, you endured, and that's more rebellion than most manage. The drip above you slows. The air grows colder. You pull the blanket tighter, whispering to no one in particular. Tomorrow will come, and I'll still be here. The city won't remember your name, but for now, it keeps you company. And if you listen closely, beneath the coughs, the creaks, and the whispers of the old house, you might almost hear the sound of London breathing, slow, heavy, eternal, waiting for you to wake again. The morning creeps in through a fog of coughs. You wake to the sound of someone retching in the hallway, in a house with walls as thin as a secret. Your throat scratches like sandpaper, your head throbs, and you know exactly what that means. Another visit to the doctor. Not the kind with framed diplomas and white coats. Those are for the rich, but the 1-2 streets over, who smells faintly of gin and misplaced confidence. His office, or rather, his room above a fishmonger's, an education in chaos. Bottles of colored liquid line the shelves like potions in a child's nightmare. There's a half-dissected frog on the table, a saw that looks too well used, and a cat sitting on the windowsill, glaring as if it too disapproves of your life choices. You step inside, greeted by the heady aroma of carbolic acid and despair. "Ah," he says, squinting at you through cracked spectacles, "the lungs again." You nod. He listens to your chest with a stethoscope that may or may not have been cleaned since Queen Victoria's wedding. Then he prescribes what every self-respecting Victorian doctor prescribes: opium syrup, leeches, and a good bleeding. He calls it balancing the humours. You call it medieval cosplay, still. You take the bottle of laudanum because in a world without antibiotics or hope, a little opium feels like mercy. They sell it everywhere now, even at grocers. Children's cough syrup comes with a smile and a sight of addiction. You sip the cloudy mixture and feel the warmth spread through your chest, dulling the ache. For a moment, you could almost believe in healing. Down the street, an advertisement catches your eye. Dr. Jane's Family, tonic cures, consumption, melancholy, and broken hearts. You almost laugh. Today's influencer scams look tame compared to this. At least your modern miracle serums don't contain mercury ore, do they? You've stopped keeping track. A lesser-known truth about this city is that many of its finest doctors trained not in universities, but in morgues. Anatomy schools often relied on fresh subjects, and where there's demand, supply follows, sometimes with a shovel. The resurrection men, as they were called, dug up newly buried bodies to sell for study. People still whisper that some didn't wait for the burying part. You try not to think about it when he sets a cold hand on your arm. He suggests a vapor. Treatment, something involving hot water, eucalyptus, and faith. You sit as instructed, breathing the rising steam through a towel. It smells faintly of boiled socks, but it helps. For a few minutes, you imagine being somewhere else, somewhere with warm beds and medicine that actually works. But the magic fades fast. Outside, the air smells of soot and sewage again. You press a handkerchief to your mouth when you cough and find blood. The doctor shrugs. The lungs are weak, he says. Too much night air. You almost admire his creativity. Blaming air for everything is convenient, it's everywhere, after all. You leave him a coin and step back into the fog. The world feels softer around the edges, the laudanum doing its job. The street vendors shout through the mist. Oysters, chestnuts, patent elixirs, promising immortality. You buy a cup of broth instead. It's thin, salty, and possibly rat-based, but it's hot, and heat counts as luxury here. Nearby, two women argue about a girl who died last night. One insists it was typhus, the other swears it was syphilis. The truth doesn't matter. What matters is that she's gone, and the world spins on without noticing. Historians still argue about how many women were lost to disease, to poverty, to simple exhaustion. No one really knows. Records blur, names vanish, and the only proof left is the quiet ache that lingers in places like this. You wander toward the Thames, where the morning fog clings low and the smell is part water, part waste. It's said that during the Great Stink of 1858, the odour was so unbearable that Parliament nearly fled London. They finally decided to build sewers, not because they cared about the poor dying of cholera, but because the smell reached the upper windows of Westminster. You breathe that same air now and can't help but smile. Imagine living in a time where the government only acts when its own nose is offended. Then again, maybe that hasn't changed much. You pass a chemist's window displaying glass bottles labeled cure-all, an elixir of youth. Inside, a boy no older than 10 is grinding herbs under the watchful eye of a grey-haired man. You pause, fascinated. In another life, you might have been that boy's mother, or perhaps the one selling these remedies with a rehearsed smile. Victorian medicine, you realize, isn't just about curing it, about selling hope in liquid form. A cheaper high than faith, and much easier to bottle. Your mind drifts to the hospital near Smithfield Market, where nurses in crisp aprons bustle like angels with unpaid overtime. They say Florence Nightingale reformed these places, brought light and order and hygiene. You picture her gliding through the halls with a lamp, and for a moment the story feels almost holy. But you've also heard the whispers, the ones that say even she couldn't fix the stench of poverty, or the ignorance that masqueraded as science. Some claim she fought more battles against bureaucracy than against death itself. If that's true, she must have been exhausted. You cough again. The blood on your handkerchief looks darker now. You could go back to the doctor, but you already know what he'd say. Rest, warmth, and clean air, as if those could be bought for 3 pence a night. You decide instead to find the apothecary who mixes herbal teas and gossip in equal measure. He once told you that boiled nettles can cleanse the blood. You didn't believe him then, but tonight you might try anything as you walk. Your body sways between exhaustion and delirium. The gas lamps flicker, their glow painting everything gold and sickly. You catch your reflection in a shop window pale, hollow-eyed, yet somehow still standing. You're tougher than you look. You whisper, then you grin, though that's not saying much. Somewhere in the distance, the church bells toll, slow and heavy. Another soul gone, another night survived. You wonder, briefly, what future generations will say about this age. Will they call it romantic, industrial, maybe dreadfully aesthetic? They'll probably light a scented candle called Victorian fog and call it history. You almost laugh, but the cough steals your breath first. You reach your lodging, climb the creaking stairs, and collapse onto your bed. The blanket smells faintly of mold and comfort. As you drift into a half-sleep, the city hums outside a living organism, full of sickness and survival, cruelty and care. You think about how far medicine has come since then, and how much of it still relies on luck and lies. For now, You close your eyes, whispering to the darkness, "At least I lived in the age before WebMD." And for the first time that day, you laugh without coughing. The first time he says he loves you, it's raining. Of course, it is Victorian London seems to come with a permanent drizzle setting. You're standing beneath the overhang of a gin shop, your shawl clinging to your shoulders, when he offers you a cigarette and a smile that looks practiced but not yet worn out. His coat is too fine for this street, his eyes too clean, and you think, here comes another man who mistakes charity for romance. He says his name is Henry. They're all Henry, or Edward, or something equally respectable that sounds safe in candlelight. He tells you he wants to save you, that you don't belong here, that you deserve something better. You almost laugh, not because it's funny, but because you've heard it all before. Rescue, in your experience, is just another word for rearranged captivity. You let him buy you dinner anyway. A woman's got to eat. He takes you to a place with white tablecloths, the kind that make you forget your own hands are cracked and stained from cheap soap. He orders wine without checking the price, and you wonder if he's showing off or just careless. When the waiter brings roast beef swimming in gravy, you try to eat like a lady, though your stomach growls louder than your manners. Henry talks about his office job, his dreams of moving to the countryside, how London's gotten so dirty lately. You bite your tongue. You could tell him why, about the endless soot, the bodies floating down the Thames, the overcrowded slums, but he wouldn't want to know. Men like him prefer their women like their city, prettied up and silent about the smell. Still, when he brushes your hand, there's a flicker something warm, something dangerously close to hope. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's the way he says your name, like it isn't part of the night. Later, when he leans in and says he could take you away, you almost let yourself believe it. Almost, freedom sounds wonderful, until you remember the rent. The landlady doesn't take promises as payment. Besides, you've seen how those stories end. The rescued girl becomes a kept woman, the cage just lined with softer silk. You walk with him along the embankment, the river glinting like black glass. The lamplight makes everything look a little more forgiving. He says he'll come see you again tomorrow. You nod, knowing that if he doesn't, someone else will. Back at your lodging, the women are gossiping about another manor viscount, this time who fell for one of the girls and set her up in a flat near Covent Garden. They call it a love nest, though everyone knows it's just a different sort of transaction. Some say she's happy, others say she cries into laced pillows every night. The truth, as always, depends on who's telling it. Historians still argue about whether Victorian men were truly moral or merely obsessed with appearing so. They loved to preach purity, yet half of London's wealth flowed through its brothels and music halls. The hypocrisy was so thick you could bottle it and sell it as perfume. Speaking of perfume, you dab a little lavender behind your ears, the cheap kind that burns slightly. It's almost funny men like Henry adore the idea of innocence, but it's the scent of sin that draws them in. Maybe that's what they really love, the illusion of rescuing what they secretly desire. Some nights, you walk through the park and watch couples on benches, holding hands beneath the gaslights. You try to remember the last time someone touched you just to keep you warm. You think of Henry again, of the way his voice softened when he said your name. You wonder if he's home with his wife now. You wonder if she smells the same perfume on his collar and pretends not to notice. The city hums around you, full of longing and lies. Somewhere a horse whinnies, Somewhere, a piano plays a waltz through an open window. You imagine yourself dancing in that parlor, not as a guest, but as someone who belongs. Then the vision breaks. Your shoes are soaked through, your feet ache, and you laugh quietly at the absurdity of it all. A lesser-known fact about love in your time: even romance had a price list. The marriage market, as polite society called it, was as transactional as any street corner. Dowries were negotiated like contracts, introductions arranged by social brokers. Respectable women sold their virtue for security. You sold your company for survival. The difference, really, was just paperwork once. A friend of yours, Maggie, fell truly in love. The man was kind, gentle, even poor. They planned to run away together. But one morning, she was gone. Some say he left her. Others whisper she left first, taking his watch and what little money he had. You never found out the truth. Maybe both were true. Love and illusion often are. You lie awake that night, listening to the sounds of the street. A carriage wheel clattering over stones, a drunk singing off-key, someone crying softly in the next room. You think about how modern people post quotes about healing energy and setting boundaries, and you smile in the dark. If only they knew what setting boundaries meant in 1885. It meant keeping a knife under your pillow and hoping no one tested your resolve. There's comfort, though, in the little things. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery below, the rare warmth of sunlight sneaking through the fog, the laughter that bursts out of you when you least expect it. Those are the things that keep you going. You cling to them the way Henry clings to his delusions of saving you. Sometimes, when the night stretches too long, you imagine writing him a letter. You'd thank him for the dinner, the smile, the brief illusion of being someone else. You'd tell him not to worry you were never his to rescue. Maybe you'd sign it yours, almost. But of course, you never send it. Paper is expensive, and besides, words like that are best whispered to the dark dot as the city settles into sleep. You feel the quiet weight of it, all the pretending, the performing, the longing that never quite dies. You think of how love now is measured in swipes and texts, in read receipts and emojis, and somehow it feels just as hollow, just as hungry. Still, you smile, because even if love was a trick, even if illusion was the only warmth you ever knew, it was yours. And in a world that tried to own every part of you, that small, stubborn piece of your heart still beating, still foolish, feels like freedom. You close your eyes and whisper, half laughing, at least now, heartbreak doesn't come with smallpox. And with that, the night breathes with you slow, soft, uncertain but alive. You find out slowly, painfully, that in Victorian London, justice wears a gentleman's face and a silk cravat. A woman's mistake is sin, but a man's crime is simply a misunderstanding, best settled over port and cigars. You walk past Bow Street, where constables stand in polished boots, looking self-important under gaslight, while inside the magistrate's court, women like you wait heads bowed, hands trembling not for fairness, but for the mood of the man behind the desk. Your crime? Loitering, indecency, breathing wrong in the wrong dress. The court clerk reads the charge like it's theatre, and the audience London itself applauds from the shadows. They say justice is blind, but in this city, she squints when it comes to women. The law is not a scale. It's a tightrope strung over mud, and you're expected to cross it in broken boots. You think of the men who've left marks on your skin and your reputation, and how they'll sleep soundly tonight in feather beds, probably dreaming of your face without remembering your name. A constable smirks when you speak, his breath thick with gin. He says you can make things easier for yourself. You wonder if that's the same offer they made Eve in the garden. Back on the street, the newspapers shout about public morality. A member of parliament has been caught in a scandal, but his wife, apparently, has failed to provide sufficient domestic harmony. The editorials blame women for leading men astray, as if London's men were helpless moths and you, the city's single flickering flame. You can't help but laugh. Small, bitter sound that fog nearly swallows whole. Sometimes justice does arrive. A woman named Annie was once tried for murder, accused of poisoning her employer's soup. The evidence was thin, the motive thinner. Yet the jury deliberated just long enough to finish their lunch before declaring her guilty. Years later, historians still argue whether she did it or whether the arsenic came from the wallpaper. Fashionable green pigment made with the same stuff used to kill rats. Progress, it seems, has always been a bit toxic. You remember another woman, Mary, not her real name, who sold oranges by day and herself by night. She once threw a rock at a constable who tried to drag her off for disturbing the peace. They made an example of her. The papers called her a disgrace to womanhood. She called it self-defense. No one wrote that part down. It's easy, isn't it, to think of those times as barbaric, tucked safely in the museum of then. But even now, you can feel echoes, the whispers of judgment, the way people still weigh women differently, the quiet cruelty of reputation. It's all just polished better. No glossier headlines, cleaner prisons, subtler shame. You imagine what it must be like to live in the modern world. No corsets, no workhouse, no walking home through smog so thick it feels like soup. You can drink water without fear of cholera. You can vote. You can swipe left, and yet, perhaps not all prisons have walls anymore. Some are built from screens and silence. The irony isn't lost on you. Victorian London punished women for being visible, and now the world rewards them for never disappearing from sight. Back then, a woman might end up in Newgate for soliciting attention. Now, she might lose her mind from trying to keep it. A strange comfort settles in your chest. Maybe history doesn't move in straight lines after all. Maybe it loops, circles back, whispers through the centuries, reminding us that every liberty came at a price someone else already paid. As you pass the Thames, the reflection of the gaslight trembles on black water. Somewhere downstream, the city's refuse floats a blend of ash, soap, and broken dreams. Once, they used the same water to clean wounds, believing filth could heal filth. Doctors prescribed leeches for hysteria, mercury for melancholy, and ice baths for passion. You can almost hear the sarcasm of the river, laughing softly at humanity's eternal confidence in nonsense. A policeman tips his helmet as you walk by. For a moment, you think it might be courtesy. Then you notice his eyes linger too long. Nothing has changed. Everything has dot. Later that night, back in your lodging, the air feels heavy. One of the girls coughs herself to sleep. Another whispers prayers that sound more like apologies. You lie awake, tracing the cracks in the ceiling. Somewhere outside, a man shouts, a carriage rattles. The fog presses its cold breath against the window pane. You imagine, just for a moment, that someone centuries ahead will listen to this story, your story through glowing screens in quiet bedrooms. Their world cleaner, brighter, safer. You hope they'll feel a flicker of gratitude, maybe even a shiver of humility. Because comfort, after all, is built upon the bones of discomfort. Take a slow breath in and out. You survived another night under the weight of laws that weren't written for you. And though history may pretend to forget women like you, the city still hums your name when the gaslights flicker. Justice, mercy, love, they all wear new costumes now, but they play the same tune. So you listen, half in sadness, half in laughter, and whisper to the dark, at least now, we can tell the story before someone else writes the ending. You step into another London, one hidden behind velvet curtains and candlelight. The air smells of perfume and champagne, both slightly sour if you stand too close. Here, the fog doesn't crawl through alleyways. It hangs as cigar smoke above mahogany furniture and tired laughter. The men wear medals and monocles, the women diamonds and secrets. It's the same trade you know too well, only gilded, choreographed, and called something prettier dash society. You watch them twirl under chandeliers, pretending sin can't stick to silk. A duchess flirts with a viscount, her laugh just a touch too polished. Across the room, a banker's hand rests on a governess's waist for a second too long. No one gasps. They just smile, politely pretending not to notice. The line between virtue and vice is drawn in lace hair and lace, as you know, tears easily. They call it the season, when young ladies are displayed like art, and older ones, barter for better husbands, were secrets. You could almost admire it if it weren't so funny. After all, what's the difference between a woman earning her keep in a dim Whitechapel street and one doing the same in a gilded ballroom? Only the price of the candles. Some evenings, you sneak closer, pretending to be part of the serving staff. You carry trays, you watch faces. Once, you overheard two ladies whispering about another guest, something about falling from grace. You expected scandal. Turned out, she'd married beneath her station. Love, apparently, was the most unforgivable offense in that room. Victorian London adored appearances. Reputation was a kind of currency, fragile, glittering, and impossible to launder once soiled. People spoke of morality the way they spoke. Of fashion, passionately, and with complete disregard for consistency. You could ruin your good name by showing an ankle at the wrong dinner party, or earn redemption by donating to a charity for the poor as long as someone printed your name in the paper. And oh, the charities. Elegant women in pearls organizing tea parties for the fallen. They'd sip from china cups, raising money to reform women like you, while their husbands secretly funded brothels down the street. One could almost applaud the efficiency of such hypocrisy, kept the economy balanced, at least a lesser known. Truth hides in these drawing rooms. Many of London's most respected matrons were former courtesans, reinvented through marriage or money. One was rumored to have advised a prime minister, though history quietly forgets her name. Others built schools, hospitals, even churches, but their portraits, when painted, left out the smirk that knew too much. Historians still debate whether these women were victims of circumstance or masters of adaptation. You think maybe they were both playing the same rigged game, just better dressed. After all, survival in this city was never about purity. It was about performance. You pass a window and glimpse your reflection among the glow. For a second, you almost blend in the pearls of your imagination draped just right. Your posture trained, your smile timed to the rhythm of the violins. You wonder, in another life, could you have been one of them? And then you laugh. you'd have been bored to death. There's a particular irony to it all. The same gentlemen who condemned the working women of the East End come here at night to toast their mistresses. They preach restraint in Parliament by day and indulge in poetry and perfumed letters after dark. Victorian virtue was never about honesty, was about lighting the right corner of the room, so no one noticed the dirt dot. You think about how modern. People still chase a cleaner version of the same illusion. The parties are digital now, the drawing rooms replaced by glowing screens. The champagne is cheaper, the filters better, and still everyone's pretending, curating, arranging, editing their lives to appear spotless. A 21st century waltz of performance and pretense. At least your century was honest about its hypocrisy. This one just gives it better lighting. Someone once told you London's beauty lies in contrast the gold next to the grime, the laughter echoing above the gutters. Maybe that's true for people too. The glamorous and the forgotten are just two halves of the same heartbeat. Without one, the other couldn't glitter. You think of one of those society ladies, again the kind who smile with their eyes half closed, as if seeing something only money reveals. You imagine telling her about your nights in Whitechapel, about fog that tastes like coal and coins that never stay warm in your palm. She'd gasp, call it tragic, and then ask if your story could be published anonymously. As the night deepens, the music fades and guests drift away in carriages. The streets outside are slick with rain, the same rain that falls on every class, every district, every dream. You step into it, feeling the cold rinse the perfume from your skin. The lamps hiss softly above, as if sighing at another evening of make-believe. You pull your shawl tight and walk home past the grand houses where curtains tremble and secrets breathe. Behind you, the city hums a quiet, judgmental lullaby of wealth and want. You think about the people listening to you now, far from this. Fog, perhaps lying in warm beds, their world clean and lit by screens instead of candles. You want to tell them something simple. Don't envy the glamour. It's just another costume. The real luxury is honesty, warmth, safety, the ability to fall asleep without fear of who might knock on the door. So breathe in slowly. Let the air settle heavy in your lungs. You've walked through lies wrapped in lace, seen truth served with sugar, and somehow you're still standing. Let the fog close behind you. Let the city keep its secrets. You have enough of your own end. They're far more real, the night. Has teeth again, biting through your shawl as you walk back to the room you share with two women who know more about pain than any preacher ever will. The streets whisper your names like an old rumor. But here, in this dim lodging house, warmth comes not from fire, it comes from the sound of another heartbeat nearby. You huddle together, three women and half a loaf of bread, trading crumbs and confessions as though both could fill you. No one writes ballads about sisterhood in the alleys. History prefers the grand tales queen's wars and inventions, but if survival itself were an art, then women like you would be its quiet masters. You patch up each other's stockings, bandage each other's pride, and when one of you doesn't come back at dawn, you light a candle and say nothing. Because in this city, grief is a luxury, and candles cost too much. There's Mary, the one with the broken laugh and a talent for pickpocketing so gentle it borders on magic. And Ada, who once worked as a maid until her master decided she should serve him in other ways. The three of you have built something fragile and defiant and unspoken covenant, stronger than any law. You take turns pretending everything will be fine, and somehow that makes it almost true. It's funny, in a way. The newspapers talk endlessly about the plight of fallen women, as though you've all tripped into sin by accident. But if you could reply, you'd tell them falling wasn't the hard part, climbing back up was. They organize charity meetings in grand halls to save you, sipping tea under painted ceilings while you're here rationing crumbs and hope. And yet, despite it all, you're still here, still laughing, still living, still sharing half a crust with someone who'd do the same for you. A lesser-known truth. In 19th century London, women like you quietly formed support networks long before anyone called it activism. They pooled pennies for rent, shared childcare, and sometimes even defended each other in court when no one else would. No speeches, no banners, just a soft rebellion in shawls and whispers. Historians still argue whether those small acts of care changed anything in the grand scheme of empire. But you know they did. Maybe not in Parliament or in print, but in the small mercies that kept one more woman breathing through another cold night. History, after all, often forgets its quietest heroes. You hear a faint tune from downstairs, someone humming a lullaby older than the city itself. It's off-key, half drunk, but strangely comforting. You hum along, your voice blending with Mary's and Ada's, forming a sound that is almost peace. Outside, a constable's whistle cuts through the air. You freeze, waiting. The sound fades. You exhale. It's ridiculous how even your breathing feels like a negotiation here. And yet, between fear and fatigue, something gentle grows. Maybe it's pride, or maybe it's the stubborn joy of still existing when the world expected you not to. You think of the ladies in their parlors, wrapped in silk and gossip, and wonder if their laughter ever feels this real. Probably not. They have wine, but you have stories raw, ugly, beautiful stories that no one could buy or fake. Sometimes, Ada dreams aloud. She wants to open a small laundry someday, a place where women like you could earn an honest living. You don't have the heart to tell her that in this city, even honesty needs a permit. But you let her dream anyway. It's the only thing in this room not covered in dust. You joke, as always. If we ever get rich, I'm buying a bed big enough for all three of us. Mary laughs, wheezing through her cough. Don't forget the blanket, she says, eyes glinting. It's gallows humor, yes, but it keeps the dark from winning. Later, when the others sleep, you stare at the cracked ceiling. The damp spots look like continents. You imagine sailing away across them, a paper boat made of hope. You think about how strange it is that even in 2025, somewhere, someone still believes poverty is a personal failure instead of a shared wound. You'd like to tell them, survival isn't shameful. It's art, and women have been perfecting it for centuries, quietly, without applause. A gust of wind sneaks through the window, and you pull the blanket higher. The city outside breathes a slow, smoky rhythm of carriages, footsteps, and muffled cries. You wonder if someday someone will tell your story properly. Not as a tragedy, not as a cautionary tale, but as a small miracle of endurance. You drift into that thought like a prayer. A world where no one has to barter their body for bread, where women don't have to huddle for safety but gather for joy, where warmth isn't rationed. Maybe that's heaven, or maybe it's just a better version of here. For now, though this room is enough, it smells of damp wool and burnt candle, of shared breath and borrowed dreams. You close your eyes and listen to Mary's steady snore. It's oddly soothing, like proof that life, for all its cruelty, still insists on continuing. And somewhere, you imagine a listener, someone comfortable, perhaps under soft blankets, sipping tea. You'd tell them this next time you complain about slow Wi-Fi or lukewarm coffee. Remember that once a woman like you fought through fog and hunger just to see another sunrise. The small comforts you take for granted, safety, sleep, warmth, are luxuries carved out of centuries of someone else's endurance. So breathe. Appreciate the quiet. The world hasn't always been kind, but tonight you are safe enough to drift, to listen, to rest. And maybe, just maybe, that's the truest kind of victory. The lamps fade first, surrendering one by one to the weak grey blush of dawn. London, that restless beast, exhales into silence. The cobblestones glisten, and even the river seems too tired to move. You're still awake, half sitting by the window, fingers tracing the frost on the glass. The city looks softer now, almost innocent, as if pretending it didn't just spend the night chewing you up and spitting you out. You pulled the shawl tighter. It smells of smoke, gin, and someone else's perfume. You think about how funny it is how cities never sleep, yet people like you rarely get to dream. Someone once told you freedom feels like morning, but as you watch the light crawl through the smog, you wonder, maybe freedom is just another word for being forgotten. There's a peace to invisibility, though. No one stares. No one expects. You could vanish between breaths, and the city wouldn't even blink. And somehow, that feels ... okay. You've spent so long performing, smiling, surviving, pretending. To be unseen, finally, is almost like rest. Still, you can't help thinking about the stories people will tell of this era. The grand version. Queen Victoria on her throne, empire stretching across oceans, men with sideburns building railways and discovering germs. You'll be a statistic, a moral lesson, a shadow in a report titled The Social Evil. But history always needed its ghosts. Without them, who would haunt the conscience of progress? The air tastes of coal and wet stone. Somewhere, a carriage wheel splashes through a puddle. It sounds like applause, faint and mocking. You smile anyway, because you've lived through another night. And that's applause enough. A small, whispered truth in these years. London's streets were home to tens of thousands of women like you, so many that the city quietly depended on you. Not for moral guidance, of course, but for the unspoken business of desire, loneliness, and control. Economists would never list it, but the entire system leaned on your existence. Without you, the hypocrisy might have collapsed under its own weight. Historians still debate what to call it: a moral crisis, a necessary evil, or an inevitable symptom of poverty. But you know better. It wasn't evil or destiny. It was survival, dressed in silk when it could afford it, or rags when it couldn't. And every coin you earned was a small rebellion against the idea that a woman should starve quietly. You rise, stretch, and glance at the mirror. The reflection startles you, a pale face framed by loose hair, eyes rimmed red from fatigue. But beneath that, something steady glows. You realize you've become your own kind of monument. Not marble, not bronze, but memory soft, persistent, impossible to erase completely. Outside, the city stirs again. Milk carts creak. A baker opens his shutters, releasing a smell that feels almost holy. You close your eyes, breathing it in. Bread, fresh, real. You remember how last night's crumbs tasted like victory. But this is grace. Funny, isn't it? The things that feel divine rarely come from heaven. They come from a loaf, a friend's laugh, a bed that doesn't collapse under you. The Victorians had their cathedrals. You have moments like this. and maybe that's better. Faith built on something you can taste, hold, trust. If anyone ever tells your story, you hope they remember the warmth too. Not just the dirt or the hunger, but the laughter that rose above it. The way women like you found beauty in cracked mirrors and courage in second-hand lace. The way you made the unbearable livable, the hopeless survivable. And now, as the sun pushes higher, you sense the shift. The gaslight era is ending. Soon there'll be telephones, suffragettes, typewriters, new names for old struggles. Somewhere in the distance, a factory whistle screams the future awake. You sigh. Maybe progress means fewer ghosts. Or maybe it just builds taller buildings for them to hide behind. You step away from the window, and your bare feet find the cold floorboards. Ada is still asleep, face buried under a blanket too thin for comfort. Mary's coughing again, but softer this time. You think of how many nights the three of you have kept each other alive. One joke, one crust, one whisper at a time. You kneel beside them, brush a lock of hair from Ada's face, and feel something twist in your chest, a mix of love, sorrow, and pride. The kind of feeling that doesn't need poetry, just the quiet knowing that somehow you made it. Outside, the city brightens. Smoke turns gold, and rooftops blush pink. The world looks clean again, at least for a moment. You let yourself believe it. If anyone's listening, you'd whisper this. You live in an age of miracles. Warm water, medicine that works, jobs that don't require selling your soul or your safety. You have choices that women like you never had. Don't waste them. Don't forget how expensive they were, because every comfort you enjoy, every locked door, every light switch, every law that lets you walk freely, was built on the lives of people who didn't get to rest. You're the dream they never reached, the peace they died hoping for. So, as you lie down tonight, under a clean blanket, remember us. Remember the ones who walked through fog and filth so that you could sleep without fear. And when you breathe in that safety, let gratitude wrap around you like the softest shawl. The city fades now. The sound of wheels dulls to a hum. The last candle flickers, fighting the dawn, then sighs out. Your eyes grow heavy. The story thins to silence, leaving only warmth, breath, and stillness. It's all right now. The fog is gone. The night has done its work. You can rest, drift, gently. Let London disappear. Let time dissolve. You've survived enough for one lifetime. End of script. Sweet dreams.